They laughed when I said, "Thank you." Not the polite kind of laughter, the sharp, cruel kind that tells you you've just broken an unspoken rule. That's when I realized kindness doesn't belong everywhere, especially not in a corporate jungle dressed up as a team. My name is Hannah Lewis, and until 6 months ago, I thought I'd landed my dream job. A marketing analyst at Brightwave Media, a sleek tech advertising firm that prided itself on creativity, teamwork, and innovation. It sounded perfect on paper, a place where ideas flowed, where people collaborated. But the reality was colder. Much colder. When I joined, I was assigned to a 5-person team led by Taylor Brooks, the company's rising star. Taylor was the kind of woman who lit up a room, but only to cast shadows on others. Sharp suit, sharper smile. Her words always dripped with charm when the CEO was around, but once the door closed, that charm vanished like smoke. At first, I admired her. She was confident, respected, and brutally efficient. And maybe, deep down, I wanted her approval more than I should have. But Taylor had one rule for survival in her little kingdom. Kindness is weakness. The first few weeks, I tried to fit in, bringing coffee for the team, complimenting their work, offering to help when deadlines got tight. The first time, Taylor smiled and said, "That's sweet, Hannah." The second time, she chuckled. By the third, she didn't bother hiding her smirk. It started subtly. A sarcastic tone here, a dismissive glance there. When I'd share an idea, they'd talk over me. When I'd finish a report early, they'd accidentally forget to forward it to the client. And yet, I kept telling myself, they're just under pressure. It's not personal. But it was. Because the kinder I was, the crueler they became. One morning, during a presentation prep meeting, Taylor asked for campaign ideas for a new eco-brand client. I'd stayed up late brainstorming and proudly shared a concept centered around empathy-driven marketing, how emotional connection builds loyalty. Taylor looked at me, tilted her head, and said sweetly, "That's adorable, Hannah. But we sell products, not feelings." The room erupted in laughter. I wanted to sink into my chair. Still, I forced a smile, nodded, and said softly, "Maybe we can combine both." But she'd already moved on, acting as if I hadn't spoken at all. At lunch that day, the team sat at their usual table, the core group. When I walked toward them, tray in hand, the conversation went silent. No one looked up. I hesitated, then turned toward an empty table in the corner. As I sat down, I overheard Taylor whisper something that made the others snicker. Something about charity cases sitting alone. I stared at my untouched sandwich, heat creeping up my neck. I wanted to believe I was overreacting, that maybe I just didn't belong in their kind of humor. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about jokes. It was about power. And they enjoyed watching me squirm. Despite it all, I kept working hard. I met every deadline, fixed other people's mistakes, stayed late when no one else would. Sometimes, Taylor would send a quick, "nice work" over Slack, and my heart would stupidly leap, as if her approval could wash away the sting of everything else. That's the thing about being kind, you keep believing that if you're good enough, people will stop trying to break you. But they don't. They just get better at hiding it. The cracks started showing one Friday. Taylor called me into a quick team sync at 5 p.m. right before the weekend. When I entered, everyone was already there, even HR's intern, which was unusual. Taylor leaned back in her chair and said, "Hannah, we've noticed you've been emotional lately. Everything okay?" I blinked. "Emotional?" She smiled. "Yeah, sensitive about feedback. Maybe this job's pressure isn't for everyone." The others avoided my eyes. My throat tightened. I just care about doing things right." "Of course you do," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "And we all appreciate that. But caring too much can slow the team down, you know." Her words were sugar-coated poison. And everyone nodded along like obedient shadows. I felt small. But somewhere beneath the humiliation, a small, quiet voice whispered, "Something isn't right. They're not just teasing you." That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot long after everyone had left. My reflection in the windshield looked tired, hollow. I kept replaying Taylor's words. Caring too much can slow the team down. Maybe she was right. Maybe kindness didn't belong here. But as I gripped the steering wheel, another thought pushed through the fog, sharper, colder, and more dangerous, or maybe they're scared of it. The next few weeks felt like walking barefoot on glass. Each day looked normal from a distance, but every step cut a little deeper. Taylor still smiled in meetings, still CC'd me on group emails, still said, "Great job," loud enough for the manager to hear. But the tone was different now, colder, sharper, like a compliment meant to sting. "Great job on that draft, Hannah," she'd say, glancing at the others. Even if it needed a lot of hand-holding. A few chuckles. A few eyes averted. And, just like that, the air shifted. I told myself not to take it personally. It's fine. You're new. Maybe this is her way of pushing you to grow. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice kept whispering, "No, this is something else." One Monday morning, I came in early, the office still quiet except for the hum of the coffee machine. When I opened my inbox, my stomach dropped. The weekly report I'd finished on Friday, the one I stayed late polishing, had been sent to the client. But not by me. The sender was Taylor Brooks, and my name wasn't mentioned anywhere in the email. I stared at the screen, rereading it. She had attached my document, word for word, and ended the message with, "Let me know your thoughts. Our team worked hard on this one." Our team. Not Hannah. My hands trembled over the keyboard. I wanted to confront her, but then, what if it was an oversight? What if she just forgot? Still, that voice inside me, the one that had been quiet too long, whispered again, she didn't forget. Later that morning, during the team huddle, Taylor looked over her phone and said, "Good news, everyone. The client loved the report. Great work." Everyone clapped. I waited for her to glance at me, to give me some credit. She didn't. Instead, she looked straight at Ryan, our designer, and said, "Ryan's layout really elevated it. That's why it stood out." Ryan grinned, clueless that I'd written every line of that report. I smiled too, a small, polite thing that barely held together. It hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted applause, but because I realized this wasn't about mistakes anymore. It was control. The isolation grew slowly, almost elegantly, as if Taylor had done this before. At first, it was small things. Inside jokes shared over coffee that I wasn't part of. Group lunches where they forgot to message me. Slack threads where I'd comment and no one would reply. But when Taylor typed something, they'd respond instantly. Heart emojis, laugh reacts, applause. It felt like I was fading out of the room, pixel by pixel. One afternoon, I overheard something that twisted my gut. I had stayed late again, finalizing a campaign proposal, when I heard voices from the break room. Taylor's voice, hushed but sharp, "She's too soft. Clients like her, but she's not leadership material. She can't handle pressure." Then someone laughed, maybe Emma, our social strategist. "Yeah, she thanks people for feedback." "Who does that?" Laughter echoed. I froze behind the wall, unable to move. My ears burned. They were talking about me. And yet, when I walked in moments later, Taylor smiled like nothing happened. "Oh, hey Hannah. You're still here? You work so hard." Her tone was honeyed, but her eyes cold steel. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind replayed every little interaction, every forced smile, every time she'd forgotten to include me. The puzzle pieces fit together too neatly to ignore. Still, I kept doubting myself. What if I'm too sensitive? What if I really don't belong here? It was exhausting, fighting both them and my own thoughts. The next week brought a new project, a massive account that could mean a promotion for whoever led it. Taylor divided tasks among the team, calling out each name with her usual authority. When it came to me, she smiled faintly and said, "Hannah, why don't you handle the admin stuff? Keep everything organized." Admin stuff. The lowest rung on the ladder. Ryan shot me a sympathetic glance, but no one said anything. I nodded. "Sure. Whatever the team needs." Taylor beamed. "That's the spirit." And that was it. I was invisible again. But the universe has a strange way of revealing truth when you least expect it. A few days later, I stayed late again. The cleaning crew had already left when my computer pinged. A notification from the shared drive, a document labeled Q3 Strategy, Draft, Internal. Curious, I opened it. It was a half-finished presentation Taylor had been preparing for upper management. And there, in slide after slide, were my ideas, the empathy-driven marketing model, the visuals I'd suggested, even my phrasing. No credit. No mention. Just her name on the title slide. I leaned back in my chair, breath catching in my throat. It was all there, proof that she was taking my work, polishing it, and calling it hers. And the worst part? She was smart enough to make it look natural. My heart pounded. I wanted to print everything, run to HR, or scream in her face, but something stopped me. That small, calm voice again. Don't react. Not yet. Because somewhere deep down, beneath the confusion and heartbreak, a seed was planted, one that would soon grow into something powerful. Not revenge. Not yet. Just awareness. And awareness is the beginning of power. Hannah's kindness begins to clash with manipulation, lies, and subtle psychological bullying. She still doubts herself, but her instincts are waking up. The groundwork for her quiet, intelligent revenge has been laid. I didn't realize the knife was already in my back until I felt the twist. It happened on a Friday, the kind of morning that smells like fresh coffee and deadlines. The team was buzzing. Even Taylor looked unusually radiant in her white blazer, lips curled in that perfect executive smile. "Everyone in the conference room in 5, she said, her tone casual but commanding. "Big announcement." I followed, clutching my notebook, trying to ignore the creeping tension in my stomach. The CEO himself, Mr. Dalton, stood near the screen. He was rarely on our floor, so whatever this was, it was huge. "Taylor," he said, "why don't you walk us through your brilliant new campaign?" My pulse quickened. Her campaign? She clicked the remote, and the projector lit up, displaying the first slide, the empathy strategy, connecting brand to heart. I froze. Every word, every visual, every concept on that slide was mine. The color palette, the tagline, the emotional approach, all of it came from the proposal I'd worked on for weeks. The one she'd asked to review together last month. She'd taken it. All of it. And now she was presenting it like it had come from her mind, her vision. As she spoke, my heart pounded in my ears. I watched her pacing with practiced confidence, saying things I'd written word for word. The rest of the team nodded approvingly, throwing glances her way like she was some creative genius. No one looked at me. No one even thought to. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything. But my throat closed up. Every instinct screamed, "Stop her. Speak up." But I couldn't. Not in front of the CEO. Not whenever I would turn, and I'd look like the jealous junior trying to take credit from her boss. So I sat there, silent, forcing myself to breathe, nails digging into my palm. Then, the applause. The CEO smiled wide. "This is exactly what we need. Taylor, you've outdone yourself. You'll lead the rollout next quarter." Her grin widened just slightly, not enough for others to notice, but enough for me to see the satisfaction in her eyes. "Thank you, sir. I couldn't have done it without my wonderful team," she said, giving a small, fake laugh. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and I saw it. That glint. That silent message, "Stay quiet, sweetheart. I win." When the meeting ended, everyone congratulated her. Ryan even said, "Man, Taylor, you're on fire lately." She patted my shoulder on her way out. "Thanks for the help with the small stuff, Hannah. You're a real team player." Small stuff. I felt the words land like a slap. I waited until everyone was gone, then sank into my chair, staring at the floor. The air felt heavy, like betrayal had a physical weight pressing against my chest. I opened my old drafts, one by one. The file timestamps were there, proof I'd created it first. But what could I do? She was senior. She had influence. If I accused her, she'd twist it, make me look ungrateful, petty. That's how bullies win in corporate worlds, not by shouting, but by smiling while they stab. That night, I didn't go home. The office emptied out, lights dimmed, and I sat there with my laptop open, staring at my own words under someone else's name. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, not the wild, screaming kind, but the silent one. The kind that changes you. My kindness, the thing they mocked me for, had been used as a weapon against me. I remembered every snide laugh, every whisper, every "she's too nice" behind my back. And now I understood. They mistook kindness for weakness. Around midnight, I walked to the window overlooking the city. Neon lights flickered on the glass, rain tapped gently against it, like a rhythm syncing with my heartbeat. For the first time, I allowed myself to cry, not out of self-pity, but grief. Grief for the version of me that believed people like Taylor could be reasoned with. Grief for the faith I had in teamwork, in fairness. I cried until the ache in my chest turned into something else, something sharper. Resolve. The next morning, Taylor was all smiles again. "Morning, sunshine," she said, sliding her coffee onto the table beside me. "Rough day yesterday?" I met her gaze, calm, unreadable. "Not at all. I learned a lot." She chuckled. "Good. You'll need that attitude if you want to move up here." She walked away, heels clicking on the marble floor. And that's when it hit me. The real betrayal wasn't just her stealing my work. It was her enjoyment of it. The way she fed off my silence, my niceness, my willingness to believe the best in people. She didn't just want to win. She wanted me to break. But she had no idea what she'd just created. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest one, it's the quiet one who finally decides she's done being underestimated. That was the day something inside me shifted. I stopped seeing Taylor as my superior and started seeing her as a problem to be solved. Not with rage. With precision. I wasn't going to shout, accuse, or make a scene. I was going to learn her system. Her weaknesses. Her patterns. And then, when the time was right, I'd make sure she fell by her own hand. There's a moment when heartbreak turns into something cleaner, sharper. Not rage. Not despair. Just clarity. For me, that moment came 3 days after Taylor stole my campaign. It was a Tuesday morning, gray skies outside, the kind that make you want to crawl back under the covers. But I was at my desk early, staring at the team's Slack chat as the usual messages rolled in. Memes. Coffee emojis. Fake cheer. Then Taylor typed, "Morning team. Client loved the empathy campaign. Hannah, can you prep the logistics doc for the rollout? XX, 2 small letters, XX, a kiss of condescension." I just stared at the screen. My chest burned, but something in me had already shifted. That message didn't hurt me this time. It confirmed what I already knew. They didn't respect me because I'd been too afraid to demand it. I wasn't powerless. I'd just forgotten I had power at all. The office buzzed around me. People chatted by the coffee machine, laughter echoing faintly. The same people who had smiled to my face and whispered behind my back. But I didn't hear them the same way anymore. I saw patterns now, who deferred to Taylor, who followed blindly, who avoided conflict. It wasn't just a team. It was a hierarchy built on fear, flattery, and ambition. And I had been the perfect target, the one who smiled too much, apologized too easily, and believed that kindness would eventually win people over. But I wasn't naive anymore. Kindness didn't mean submission. And from that moment, I made a quiet promise to myself. If they wanted to see what I was capable of, I'd show them. The next week, I started observing instead of reacting. Listening instead of defending. It felt like slipping into a new skin. I noticed how Taylor subtly rewrote reality, twisting stories in meetings, planting doubts about others. I saw how Emma, the social strategist, laughed at every one of her jokes even when they were at someone's expense. And Ryan, sweet, people-pleasing Ryan, went along with it all because conflict made him uncomfortable. Every one of them played a part in the quiet, sophisticated bullying that defined our workplace. And for the first time, instead of shrinking under it, I began taking notes. Literally. After work, I started compiling a private document, Team Dynamics, confidential. I logged dates, quotes, screenshots of messages, meeting recaps. Nothing vindictive. Just truth. If Taylor had taught me anything, it was that appearances could be powerful weapons, and I was learning to sharpen mine. The turning point wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It happened one evening when I stayed late again, the office empty, the hum of the air conditioning filling the silence. I looked at my reflection in the glass partition, tired eyes, dark circles, shoulders slumped. I didn't even recognize that woman anymore. And yet, I whispered to her, "You're still here. They didn't break you." The words hung in the air like a lifeline. That's when it hit me no one was coming to save me. Not HR. Not the CEO. Not some higher sense of justice. If I wanted to make things right, I'd have to do it myself. But not with bitterness. With brilliance. So I started preparing quietly. When Taylor forgot to copy me on client updates, I'd already seen them in the shared folder. When she sent passive-aggressive remarks in Slack, I responded with perfect professionalism, no tone, no weakness. When she tried to embarrass me in meetings, I answered with calm data and results that couldn't be argued with. Each time, I saw her frustration flicker beneath her polished smile. The game was changing, and she didn't even realize I'd started playing. One afternoon, the CEO announced that the company would be reviewing quarterly leadership performance. Everyone tensed, especially Taylor. She needed that recognition to secure her next promotion. That's when my mind began to spin, not out of revenge, but strategy. I didn't need to expose her yet. I just needed to be ready. Prepared. Documented. Irrefutable. And beneath all that calm, a quiet determination bloomed, one built not on anger, but purpose. They had turned my kindness into a weakness. Now I'd turn it into my weapon. The more I focused on my own work, the more I realized how much they relied on me without admitting it. They used my ideas, my structure, my organization. Even Taylor's presentations leaned on the foundation I built. Without me, they'd collapse under their own ego. That realization didn't make me proud, it made me powerful. Because once you know the system depends on you, you stop being afraid of it. By the end of that quarter, something in me had fully transformed. I no longer walked into that office hoping to be liked. I walked in knowing I belonged because my value was undeniable. And in that quiet confidence, I found something even stronger than revenge. Control. The old Hannah, the one who tried to please everyone, was gone. In her place stood someone smarter, calmer, and infinitely more dangerous. Taylor didn't notice it yet. She still smiled, that same fake smile. She still thought I was harmless, the soft one, the pushover, the easy target. Let her think that. Because the real game was about to begin. And this time, I'd be the one smiling when it ended. Revenge, I decided, wouldn't be a firework. It would be a slow, mechanical thing, a clock that I wound carefully until the hour arrived. I wasn't interested in theatrics. I wanted facts, witnesses, and a timing so clean it looked accidental. If Taylor wanted to win by smiling and erasing people, I'd win by leaving a record so obvious even her charm couldn't rewrite it. Step 1 was collection. I stopped letting emotions dictate my actions and turned into an archivist. Every Slack snide, every helpful edit she made to my documents, every time she forwarded my work as team output, I saved it. Screenshots, email headers showing senders and timestamps, downloadable copies of shared drives. I printed things too, glossy pages with time-stamped metadata, because paper feels heavier in a meeting than a screenshot in a chat. My desk became a quiet evidence locker, organized, labeled, and mundane. That mundanity made it lethal. I also started corroborating memory with witnesses. Jenna, the junior analyst, had been watching things unfold quietly. She'd left me a sticky note last month that read, "I saw Taylor use your slide last week." I took that note to coffee and asked for more details, gently, like someone reminiscing. Jenna opened up. Dates, who was in the room, what was said. Emma, the one who laughed with Taylor, was easier than I expected. She had a conscience buried under social survival. She admitted she'd felt uncomfortable at times. Ryan, bless him, was oblivious but honest. Small confessions became recorded statements, not as threats, but as corroborative notes I kept in my folder. Step 2 was the performance. If Taylor believed I was broken, I'd sell the lie as bait. I leaned into the persona of the apologetic employee, quieter messages on Slack, humble replies, and a visible, low-energy face in the hallway. I posted a few weak, public-facing updates about taking time to reflect that made me look like I'd retreated. I knew she'd preen, because her power came from relief and disdain. Watching her relax was part of the plan. Narcissists let their guard down when they think their victim has folded. But I also did micro acts of professional excellence that seemed accidental. I'd leave impeccable folder structures in shared drives, with clear commit messages and labeled version histories. I created a discipline of leaving digital breadcrumbs, proper file names, logged edits, and comments that reference dates and decisions. It looked like good housekeeping to anyone who stumbled upon it, but to someone who knew how to read logs, it read like a timeline of authorship. I didn't touch anything that wasn't mine. I simply made my ownership obvious and easy to verify. Emotion, oddly, became a tool. I let a carefully worded frustration slip in a semi-private thread, not an accusation, just an observation about team dynamics that sounded like self-reflection. I keep thinking about ownership and who gets to speak for our work. Must be the late nights. The line was innocuous enough to be ignored by HR, but juicy enough to be overheard by a manager who liked drama. The goal wasn't gossip. It was to seed legitimate curiosity in people who mattered, the kind of curiosity that leads to quiet questions in the CEO's ear. I also used timing. The company's quarterly leadership review was approaching, the very thing Taylor wanted more than anything. Everyone would be polishing their contributions, emailing upward, and publicizing wins. That window would force her hand. If I could present a dossier to the right person, not as a vendetta but as a request for clarity on authorship, it would trigger a formal review. So I crafted the dossier, my original slides, the drafts with my name in the metadata, copies of the Slack threads, witness notes, and a neutral, factual cover letter asking for an internal audit. No rancor. No drama. Just traceable, verifiable facts. I didn't go to HR first. HR is a funnel. Complaints disappear into processes. I went to someone higher who could not ignore reputational risk, a retired mentor who sat on a brand advisory board that included our CEO. I'd helped him with a pro bono ad concept years ago. He owed me a favor and understood nuance. Over coffee, I framed the conversation as concern for the company rather than a personal attack. He listened, asked 2 probing questions, and quietly and without fanfare nudged a board member to look into authorship clarity before the leadership review. That nudge was the first domino. I set social traps too, the sort that reveal character. I organized a casual brainstorm. To clear heads, I said, and made sure a copy of my original deck was in the room, visible and dated. I invited a couple of people who'd been marginally friendly with Taylor, but still retained a shred of critical thinking. I didn't say anything. I watched. Taylor swaggered in, made the usual jokes, and began paraphrasing my lines. One of the invitees, who hadn't been at the earlier presentation, audibly remarked, "This phrasing sounds familiar. Didn't Aaron draft something like this?" The question hung there like a mine. Taylor's smile tightened. She adjusted the script on the fly. Small fissures widened. Most important, I stayed professional. I never yelled. I never accused in public. That would have given her ammunition, see? A hysterical subordinate. Instead, I cultivated an image of a competent, calm employee who happened to have irrefutable documentation. Power, I learned, doesn't shout. It files. It waits. It arrives when the audience has to choose between a polished liar and a stack of timestamps. By the time the leadership review meeting rolled around, Taylor still believed she'd broken me. She still strutted like a woman who'd won by default. She didn't see the quiet folders, the printed proofs, the hesitant questions and nudges she'd triggered. She didn't hear the small, strategic conversations I'd slipped into the CEO's orbit. To her, I was a diminished player, and that made her dangerous in the most useful way. Because people who feel invincible use fewer precautions. They act fast, trusting charm over consequence. And I had set everything to catch that speed, a trap not sprung by rage, but by evidence. When she moved, she would not be met with shouts. She would be met with the ledger of her own choices. I closed my folder, breathed in, and let my kindness sit quiet in my chest. It felt different now, not naive, but sharpened. The game was no longer about proving I was right. It was about proving, with absolute calm, that I had been truthful all along. And Taylor still thought I was broken. That ignorance would be her last advantage and my first. The leadership review room smelled like polished wood and nervous cologne. Sunlight slashed through the blinds in precise bars, and the long table gleamed like a stage. This was the moment I'd built toward in quiet. A room full of decision-makers, the quarterly report on the screen, and a dossier on the table in front of me that could not be waved away. I entered with my folder, neat, unthreatening, professional. Jenna slipped in beside me, eyes bright but steady. Malik, who had agreed to provide IT logs, sat near the end with a discreet USB. The retired mentor's nudge had already done its work. A board member I'd never met gave me the nod that meant, proceed. Taylor swept in 5 minutes late, all blazer and confidence, offering practiced smiles to the CEO. She had the look of someone carved for promotion, unruffled, used to applause. She still thought I'd folded. I let her. The CEO began with ritual politeness. We're here to evaluate contributions. The screen ticked to the agenda. Taylor took her cue and delivered a brief, polished presentation about the empathy campaign. Her words were smooth. Some executives nodded. She paused for compliments like she'd arranged them in advance. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. Calmness is a strange power. It reads as control and, in rooms like this, it unnerves people more than fury ever could. I laid my folder on the table, opened it, and began. Thank you, I said, voice even. I'm here to clarify authorship and offer the original work for confidential review. I didn't accuse. I didn't dramatize. I simply presented facts. The printed slides, side by side, showed the campaign as Taylor had presented it and the original drafts stamped with my name and dates. The front of my dossier had a clean index, commit logs, Slack threads, email headers, witness notes. Malik projected the server logs onto the screen, timestamps, IP addresses, admin access records, everything technical and neutral and terrifyingly specific. A murmur fluttered through the room. The board member who'd nudged the process leaned forward. Go on, he said. Jenna read her notes, steady as a metronome, dates, who was present in which meetings, an offhand line Taylor had sent that matched a line in my draft. Malik toggled to a forensic screenshot showing Taylor approving a public push to the demo branch from her workstation, the push that had been shared with upper management. The logs showed a sequence of edits and a later attempt to overwrite metadata. The pattern wasn't elegant, it was habitual. Taylor's smile thinned. She began to interject, at first the practiced, plausible denials. Collaboration happens. Ideas evolve. Her voice was sharp with performance. But the documents didn't care about performance. They spoke in immutable hashes and dates. You'll note, I said, turning the pages calmly, these drafts existed before the demo was pushed. My signatures are embedded. The edits follow a timeline that shows appropriation, not collaboration. Someone from legal asked for copies. The CEO's face shifted, that slow, executive calculation where reputation, liability, and optics curl into one decision. He set the folder down and said, We'll have external auditors review this immediately. For the first time since this began, I felt something loosen, not triumph but relief. The room's air tightened as lawyers did their work, questions that looked like courtesy but carried the weight of consequence. Taylor tried to salvage language, misunderstanding, team effort, but her sentences thinned and cracked under the weight of proof. The board requested interviews. HR opened a formal investigation. The auditors called for server snapshots and vendor correspondence. The practical wheels turned, and with each turn, the scaffolding of Taylor's polished story came apart. What stung most wasn't the immediate humiliation that colored her face, it was the realization that she had expected no cost for what she'd done. She'd assumed kindness meant silence. She assumed people like me would bend and disappear. She hadn't counted on documentation, on allies who quietly kept records, on a mentor who understood how narratives can be corrected when given the right nudge. When the security officer quietly escorted Taylor from the room, not in cuffs, but under the official process of an internal meeting pending investigation, the sound of her heels against the marble suddenly seemed too loud and too small. Her mouth moved, trying to frame herself as misunderstood. Her eyes found mine for a fraction of a second. I didn't look back. My face held its composure because the most piercing justice would be the ledger of facts that followed, not a scene in the hallway. People around the table shifted. Colleagues who had laughed with her now glanced down. Some avoided eye contact. Others, who had been quietly uneasy for months, breathed a small, private sigh. The room's energy changed from applause to attention. Truth has a way of reassigning loyalty, not with noise but with consequence. Outside, as I walked past the glass walls, the office hummed with a new electricity. I felt no elation, only a deep, precise calm. The helplessness that had once lived under my ribs had been replaced by a steadier thing: reclamation. I had not used their cruelty as ammunition. I had used their habits of performance, their reliance on surface illusions, against them. That night, the city glittered like an audience waiting for the next act. I sat at my desk long after the floor emptied, my folder closed beside me. I let the quiet settle. It felt like the sound of a long-held breath finally released. Justice, I learned, doesn't always come with a shout. Sometimes it arrives as a sequence of small, unavoidable truths laid out in a room full of people who must decide between what looks good and what is true. And in that room, truth walked out with me. The building looked different now. Same steel elevators, same polished floor, same glass walls that reflected ambition, but the air felt lighter, almost cleansed. The tension that once knotted every corridor had dissolved into whispers of caution. Taylor's office was empty. Her nameplate removed, her desk cleared. HR had announced her resignation in a 3-line internal memo: no farewell party, no slideshow, no fanfare. Just a quiet erasure. The same silence she'd once weaponized against me now swallowed her reputation whole. When I walked past that space, I didn't feel vindictive, only free. There's a certain poetry in watching arrogance collapse under its own weight. She hadn't lost because I destroyed her. She'd lost because she built her success on borrowed kindness and stolen credit, and kindness, when patient enough, becomes its own form of justice. The investigation report went public within the company a week later. It was clinical, detached, factual. It listed evidence trails, server activity, and unauthorized access patterns. It also highlighted a culture of internal hostility that discouraged collaboration and rewarded performance optics over substance. That line made headlines on the internal blog. It was the exact problem I'd spent months trying to address, the very reason I had been mocked. Suddenly, people started talking about empathy like it was strategy. The same team that once rolled their eyes at my soft-spoken suggestions began hosting collaborative culture meetings. The irony wasn't lost on me. But I didn't need their apologies anymore. I'd stopped seeking validation from the people who thrived on demeaning others. Because somewhere between humiliation and vindication, I'd discovered something deeper than revenge: self-respect. 2 months later, the CEO asked me to lead the new ethics and innovation team, a small, hand-picked group responsible for building creative, inclusive campaigns. It wasn't a promotion I'd begged for. It was an acknowledgement earned through quiet resilience and strategic patience. I hired Jenna, of course. And Malik, the quiet genius who had risked his position to provide truth when it mattered. Together, we rebuilt the team from scratch. No backstabbing, no power games. Just good people doing good work. The first project we launched was called the Kindness Blueprint. It wasn't just a campaign, it was a mirror. Every value I was bullied for: compassion, empathy, honesty, became the foundation of that success. And when the press release credited my name as the original creator of the idea, I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt like healing. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the company terrace, the same spot where, months ago, I had cried quietly, wondering if I was too naive for corporate life. The skyline stretched endlessly, the wind tugging at my hair, sunlight flickering across glass towers. Back then, I'd felt small. Now, I realized kindness doesn't make you weak. It makes you steady enough to outlast cruelty. I thought about Taylor then. About how easily she had underestimated me, not because I lacked power, but because my power was invisible to people like her. She thought manipulation was strength, that dominance equaled intelligence. But real intelligence isn't about control. It's about clarity. And clarity, once found, can't be taken away. A few weeks later, I received an email from a mutual acquaintance. Taylor had tried applying for a new executive position. The hiring team had contacted my company for verification, and the investigation report was part of the file. She didn't get the job. Poetic, isn't it? The same document she once thought could bury me became the reason she couldn't rise again. That's what betrayal does. It writes your downfall in invisible ink. You don't see it until light touches it. Looking back now, I don't regret being kind. I regret thinking kindness needed permission. I've learned that the people who laugh at empathy do so because it exposes something they lack. And that silence, when used with precision, can be louder than any shout. I didn't win by becoming like them. I won by staying like me. They mistook my kindness for weakness, not realizing it was the quiet armor they'd never learned to wear. And to everyone watching this, maybe you've been there too. Maybe someone took advantage of your good nature, mocked your sincerity, or turned your decency into a target. If you've ever been made to feel small for being kind, remember this. Gentle doesn't mean powerless. It means patient. It means strategic. It means unbreakable in silence. Tell me, have you faced betrayal like this? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments. And if this hit home, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me for more real stories of strength, betrayal, and poetic justice. Because sometimes, the kindest revenge is peace.